Yeah.
and you were a free agent. What led to you ending up in Baltimore?
I had had surgery in May of 1990. I had my labrum reattached. It took me a year to get back. I came back. I pitched well in September, and the Cubs had decided to kind of go in a different direction. And I got a phone call from a former teammate, Johnny Oates. Johnny Oates is a huge part of my career. In 1979, as a rookie, Johnny caught the majority of the starts that I had that year, and I went on to win the Rookie of the Year. In 1984, I get traded to the Cubs. The bullpen coach for the Chicago Cubs was Johnny Oates. I didn't go to the pitching coach or the scouting reports or anybody for a program on how to pitch to the opponent. I went to Johnny. And as a lot of people know, I got hot. I went 16-1. I won the Cy Young Award. The Cubs got to the playoffs and all of that. Well, when Johnny Oates called, obviously he had my attention. But I think I was 35, 36 years old. He was the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. And he goes, "I'd love for you to come here." He said, "I told the Orioles, the only thing I want for Christmas is you." And so my agent and I, Barry Axelrod, we flew to Baltimore. And as you know, the rest is kind of history. We got to Camden Yard, and at that point, Larry Lucchino, the president, was kind of hesitant. He knew what my price tag was, and he said, "We can't afford that. We got to get a couple more pitchers." Well, Johnny walked me out to the mound at Oriole Park at Camden Yard, and he said, "I want you to look around." And he pointed down the left field line. He pointed down the right field line. He talked about Fenway, talked about Wrigley, talked about all of the great ballparks in the history of baseball and how there was a lot of that combined there, along with the modern amenities that they had for the crowd of today. And he goes, "Don't tell anybody." He goes, "But you're going to throw the first pitch ever in this ballpark." And literally, I got goosebumps on my arms then, and I'm doing it again now. At that point, I walked off the mound. I told my agent to make a deal, whatever it takes. And from that day, on in 1992, I was a Baltimore Oriole.
Awesome, awesome. And when Oates took you to Camden Yards, how finished was like the stadium? The New York Times article where you talked about this, they call it a construction site.
It was probably,
Being done, were they still working on it?
yeah, they were still working on it. There was a lot of noise as we walked to the mound. And in fact, when I signed the contract, I signed it in one of the little cooler storage rooms where they were going to store food at some point. The electricity hadn't been turned on yet. When we got done with the meeting, we walked outside to one of the little trucks that had like sandwiches and things for the workers. And that's where Larry Lucchino treated us to lunch. There was still a lot to be done there, but you just got the feeling that, wait a minute now, this is different than any ballpark I've ever seen. The one thing Johnny pointed out was down the left field and right field lines, the seats were pointed towards the mound. Now, as you know, in all the ballparks before that, you just kind of looked out at center field and you could see the crowd all looking back this way to see the action. This ballpark was built for the fans. It changed the fan experience at the ballpark. I'll never forget the first week coming home from Camden Yard and my wife telling me, she goes, "You won't believe how great the food is." Well, in the past, when I played for the Dodgers, you'd get you a Dodger dog. When you go to Wrigley, you'd get you a Murphy's cheeseburger. All of a sudden they had crab cakes. They had healthy things for the fans to eat. Camden Yard was built for the Baltimore Oriole fan.
Yeah. Yeah. And when Oates told you that you were going to throw out the first pitch in that ballpark, what were your what were your original thoughts? Were you thinking like, oh, what about Messina? What about Ben McDonald? Did you when you came to Camden Yards that day? Did you think there was any chance that he was going to tell you when the opening day started?
The funny part about it, that was what sold me on going to Baltimore. And literally 10 days into spring, the reason Lucchino didn't want to pay me that much was because he thought we needed more help as far as the rotation was concerned. And I told him, I didn't know who they were. I said, if this Ben McDonald and Mike Mussina are that good, you don't need any help. I've helped Greg Maddux. I've helped Jamie Moyer. I know what's going on here. If they're half as good as you say, we're going to be fine. You won't need another pitcher. And he goes, can I put that in the contract? And I laughed, and my agent laughed. My agent was like, no, and I go, yeah, go ahead and put it in. The funniest part about that story was that about 10 days before opening day at Camden Yard, I walk into Johnny's office, and I said, Johnny, you're making a mistake. I go, Ben McDonald's a lot better than I am. He laughed, and he goes, I know that. He said, Mike Mussina's better than you are too. He goes, but last year, 1991, we had the American League MVP and we still finished in last. He goes, my plan is for you to match up against everybody else's number one pitcher. You're going to face the guy on opening day. You're not going to get a lot of run support. But I know you. With you being healthy, you'll hold your own. And he goes, how we're going to get ahead was he stacked Ben McDonald up in game 3, Mussina in game 4. When you face that part of the rotation, you're going to get more runs to work with. And Johnny goes, that's how we're going to get above 500. That's how we're going to contend in the American League East. And if you go back and look at the numbers, yeah, I think I threw 230 or 40 innings. I won 16 games. I was like 16 and 15. Mussina, McDonald got us to the point where we had a chance to win the division, particularly at the 1st of September. He was a genius in how he planned that out. And sure enough, I mean, you go back and look at the score of opening day, it was 2-0. We got a run on Chris Hoyle's double, and we got a run on Billy Ripken's squeeze bunt. There wasn't going to be a whole lot of offense to work with. Johnny knew that, and you know, an interesting thing about that, our buddy Tim Kirchin told me that was the last time both starting pitchers on opening day threw a complete game. I don't know if it's true, but I've never not believed Tim Kirchin, which is kind of an ironic thing when we look at, you know, here we are at the end of the season in 2025. Before the game started, after BP and everything, the clubhouse guys had a spread, and it was, you know, it was submarine sandwiches, and half the team got food poisoning, and everybody joked that the reason that I got it the worst was because obviously I ate the most. But what I'll never forget is I got sick immediately that night. I wasn't able to ride in the parade the next day leading up to opening day. I'm sorry, but the truth is I threw up in the car they put me in. They send me home, and that night at about, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, my wife sent my agent to find a store to get me Pepto-Bismol or something to try to calm my stomach down, because I mean, it was bad. It was coming out both ends. I had a fever. So my wife called Johnny Oates and said, hey, I'm just giving you a heads up. But she goes, Johnny, you know Rick as well as I do. He's going to pitch no matter what. I get to the ballpark. I have 103 fever. I look on the trainer's table, and there was Cal Ripken Sr. I mean, he had it as bad as I did, man. I didn't know if he was going to be able to coach. I knew one thing. I mean, I made Johnny a promise that I would sign with the Orioles. I wasn't going to miss that start. And, you know, I mean, looking back on it, I was really lucky that it was an overcast day. As you know, in Baltimore, it can get warm. If it had been the normal humidity and everything, without a doubt, I wouldn't have made, I don't know if I'd have made it out of the first inning. But the weather cooperated, and I was able to get through 9, and obviously couldn't wait to get home when it was over with.
Yeah. When you walked out of the dugout on your way to throw out that first pitch, what was the environment like? What were you feeling?
You know, what's funny about that is that I mean, I've never really heard a crowd. And I think that's a blessing. I think that, you know, you go on the road and they're booing you and they're saying things and throwing things at you. As I went to the mound, I mean, all I thought about was getting out of that first inning and making sure that, I mean, I didn't want to throw up. I was worried more physically about me than I was about the Cleveland Indians. And I knew one thing that I learned about the Orioles in spring training was defensively, they were as good as any team that I ever played on. You got the Ripken boys up the middle, and that outfield with Brady Anderson, Mike Devereaux, and Joe Ursulak, they could cover as much ground. They could all three throw. I knew one thing, if you keep it in the park, you got a chance to win with this team. And, you know, that was my secret. I think I walked one guy that day. I might have intentionally pitched around somebody, but for the most part, I was just going to challenge people and let our defense work.
Do you remember what pitch you threw for the first pitch?
I don't. You know, I was facing Kenny Lofton, And I knew that he was a young, aggressive hitter, and he's one of those guys that's just hard to walk. So I would imagine I tried to get ahead with something that wasn't in the zone. I don't think he swung at it. I think eventually I had to come back in the zone to get him out. And then from that point on, I just tried to get ahead and then get people to chase pitches that they couldn't do anything with.
Yeah, in the earlier innings of the game, were you just focusing on working ahead? Like, did the thought, I don't want to be the first one to ever allow a run in this ballpark ever cross your mind, or you just kind of locked in and finding spots?
I think, no, I didn't. I wasn't worried about giving up a run. I remember some great advice I got from Dusty Baker as a teammate with the Dodgers. I gave up a 3-run homer. I'd walk 2 guys and a guy hit a homer, and he goes, I can't get that back for you. He goes, if you give up a solo home run, I can get that back for you myself. So I had that mentality that, you're not going to get beat by solo home runs. And very seldom in my career did that happen. So, I was constantly challenging people. And really the big break came for me in the bottom of the 5th when we scored 2 runs. Because now at that point, I can give up a solo home run and I've still got the lead. I still have a chance to win the ball game. Also, I think leaning back, I think I started 9 opening days. I started the opening night that got rained out at Wrigley Field. I was a part of a lot of those big games. And I learned that, when you're in the bullpen warming up for your start, you get control of your fastball, your curveball, and whatever, but you have to learn to control that adrenaline. And I think I took that to the mound with me that day because from the very first inning, I was able to locate. I wasn't overexcited about it. I was honored more than anything to be able to throw the first pitch at Oriole Park at Camden Yard.
Yeah. Do you remember what the environment, like the dugout, was like when the O's put their first runs across? Do you remember what the crowd was like then?
I do because it looked like, it was kind of boring. And I remember Larry Lucchino, the president, was actually mad at the end of the game because it ended so quick. he had all these souvenirs and he had all this food and everything that they were trying to sell to pay for the ballpark. And literally, I think he meant it too. He's a little upset. He'd like to have had us been out there for a little bit longer. But, I just remember the pace of the game. It was going along. It was helping me out a lot because physically I wasn't at 100%. And then, once we got the 2 runs, my job was to go out there and get 3 outs and get back into the dugout as quick as I could. I think that's part of what Johnny, that's part of the reason why he chose me to pitch that, because the moment wasn't going to be too big because I'd already been there many times. No, because as I told you, in September of 1991, I got healthy. My velocity wasn't where it needed to be, but I was healthy, which meant, back in that day, Sandy Koufax was a guy that taught me what a quality start is. It's not 6 innings and 3 or less earned runs allowed. A quality start's at the end of the game when you shake the catcher's hand, okay? That's what my goal was every time I ever took the mound. And, that was just the mentality. It was like, we didn't have pitch counts back then. If a guy would have showed me a pitch count counter, there's no telling what I would have done with it. But, that's your goal. That's the plan that you have. That's the job of an ace. That's the job of a number 1 pitcher, is that your manager knows every 5th day he can count on you being out there for 7, 8, 9 innings, whatever it takes. And what happens with that is a number 1 actually helps you win 3 out of every 5 days. You think about the day before your ace pitches. You can unload that bullpen. You don't need them. You might need the closer for an inning, but you can go to the bullpen quicker to try to win that game. After your ace those 8 or 9 innings, what happens the following day? You got your bullpen back. Everybody's ready to go. So, that was always my key. And the only goal I ever had when I took the mound was to see a W by my name in the newspaper the next day. And knowing that, you had to give your bullpen a day off, and that was always the goal. It didn't always work, but that was the goal to begin with.
What was it like on the final out? How loud was the stadium? What did it mean to you to get the win in your first start at Camden Yards, and the first start ever of anyone at Camden Yards?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
What was it like getting the final out of the game, and then what did it mean to you to get the final out, get the win, the first win that anyone got at Camden Yards?
That's really a funny story because I'll tell you what happened. You got to go back to 1984, and hopefully you can put some of this film together. But in 1984, the Cubs hadn't been to the playoffs in 39 years. I'm out there for the ninth inning. We're in Pittsburgh. I get 2 outs with nobody on. The hitter was there. It was the only guy that had 2 hits that night. I ended up throwing a 2-hitter. But the hitter was Joe Orsulak, who was my right fielder on opening day at Camden Yard. Orsulak had both hits. I threw a fastball for a strike to begin with. I threw him a curveball, which he took. And my plan was to throw a fastball about a foot outside to get him looking there. And then I was going to bounce my breaking ball at his back foot, get him to swing. And I wanted to strike out the last guy, right? You want it to be a great moment. Well, I throw that fastball about a foot outside, and the home plate umpire, Lee Wire, raises his right hand and calls him out. And if you look at it, I kind of went like, no, I'll get him on the next pitch. No, don't call him out on that one. I didn't want that. Well, I'll be honest with you. Paul Sorrento had a couple of hits in that ball game. I think I gave up 4 or 5. And after I got 2 strikes on him, I go, oh, I kind of know how this works here. And Hoyles called for a fastball in. I went, no. Breaking ball, no. Fastball away, yeah. And I kind of motioned, get out there. And if you look at it, it's 4 or 5 inches off that outside corner. And, thank goodness the crowd was great. The main reason he called it strike 3 was the crowd. He wanted to give them what they wanted, and he wanted to get off the field as well. So I kind of flashed back to a situation that I had a lot like that big moment and trying to complete that ball game. And, Joe Orsulak and I still laugh about it a lot, man. He still wants me to try to throw that breaking ball by him with 2 strikes.
Following the game, what was it like just, walking off the mound, shaking hands with your catcher, and then post-game and in the clubhouse?
You know what? It should have been a lot more fun than it was. As I told you, I had 103 fever when the game started. I wasn't feeling well. Yeah, I was excited to get us off to a good start. I was excited that everybody in Baltimore had a chance to breathe it all in. As I think about that, I go back to 1982, 83, and half of 84. I was with the Cleveland Indians, and we played our games against Baltimore at old Memorial Stadium. And I had a lot of success there. I don't know why it was, but I pretty much owned the Orioles for those 2 years and everything. And I loved that ballpark. It just seemed like a great place to pitch. I know there's a lot of history of Jim Palmer and all the great pitchers and things that they did there. I missed that ballpark, but then all of a sudden, as I looked at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like this. And you got to remember, I started my career, I had just turned 20. I pitched my first game in the big leagues at Dodger Stadium. I played almost 8 years at Wrigley Field. I had been to Fenway. I'd been to all these great parks. And then, all of a sudden, I'm seeing a lot of the history of the old great ballparks, but I'm seeing all of the new things, all of the things that like an 8-year-old kid or a high school kid or a college kid, that they can come there and enjoy. They can see the scoreboard. They can see the replays, the videos. There were just so many new things and great things, the atmosphere, the building behind it, just the whole setting, being downtown, the excitement. And, the thing I remember, and I couldn't wait to get home, we had a big party. We had Sir Charles Barkley was there, Mark Harmon was there, the actor, Pete Coors was there. They all came back to our house at the end of the game. We had a party, and I did the best that I could, but I remember trying to get out of there just to get to the freeway, and nobody wanted to leave. Everybody wanted to stick around. They just, the game only lasted, I think, barely 2 hours. I think people just wanted to take it all in, and I think there was some doubt, to begin with. Are we doing the right thing? What was wrong with Memorial, Stadium and all of that? I think that first game might have let everybody know, hey, we're a part of something special, and it's even more cool to be an Oriole fan.
Yeah. You ever look at modern ballparks, I guess, and think about, because you said the Camden Yards took a lot from these old ballparks, like a lot of history from them.
Yeah.
You look at modern ballparks and say these parks took a lot from Camden Yards?
That's a great point, because Camden Yard it changed baseball. I remember when Larry Lucchino left Baltimore and he went to San Diego, You know, he created the same thing. You know, I don't know what year it was. I don't know how many years after that. But you look around baseball, and everybody has tried to copy Camden Yard. And the thing that I think about it is that I was just back there last year, and it's every bit as beautiful as it was when it was built. I think about the upkeep. Yeah, they've moved the walls back a little bit. My career ERA would be a little bit lower had they have done that to begin with. But to begin with, the cool part about the way it was built was, man, I had Brady Anderson, I had Mike Devereaux going into the stand, bringing home runs back. You know, it was just, there was so much excitement. There were so many, you know, you don't have to always get a hit to be the best player in a ball game. Sometimes it comes from a guy playing defense. And I think about that day, Camden Yard. You got Chris Hoyles. He drove in the first run ever there, and he caught a shutout. I mean, as a catcher, that I don't think you can have a better day than that. I do. But I'll be honest with you, and my wife and a lot of people have told me that, you know, I kind of left it all there. You know, I wasn't going to come out of a ball game. I was never going to say I was tired. I had some games where I threw over 150 pitches, several games. I threw a lot of complete games. I remember, like, towards the end of April, Brady Anderson come up to me like, he goes, "Are you for real? Like, what are you doing?" You know, if I look back on it, and I might have said, well, when I get to 100 pitches, I'm done. You know, that might be it. But I just wasn't raised that way. I wasn't built that way. I wasn't the same pitcher the last 2 years after that. There's no doubt about it. But honestly, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I did the best I could every fifth day. And, you know, we had a lot of excitement. I remember Larry Lucchino saying that his goal every year is that the team is in contention on September 1st. That means that the fans have had a great time. There's a lot of excitement. A lot of things could come together. We weren't able to add the pieces at the deadline that Toronto did that year. And if you go back and look at it, that's probably the reason in September they ran off from us. We just, I don't know if they didn't have the budget. I didn't know what it was. But, you know, at 92 and 93, I think, you know, Toronto added David Cohn. They added Ricky Henderson. You know, they added a lot of pieces, Jack Morris, that we weren't able to add. But both in 92 and 93, we were right there. We had a chance. Toronto, of course, went on to World Series. We didn't get a chance to do that, but as Larry Lucchino would say, it was a positive year for not only the players, the front office, but for the fans, most importantly.
Yeah. My dad's been a season ticket holder since Camden Yards opened in '92, and he always talks about how good the fans used to be, how it was always sellouts. As a player, did you notice that the fan environment was different than going to other stadiums?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you what I noticed that I really liked. They knew baseball. They knew the game. Man, it wasn't like the Dodger fan, Cub fan, everything. They knew the game as well. You know, Cleveland fans, all like that. But I never played in front of an empty seat at Camden Yard. It was always packed. It was always there. And what I loved the most about it was when there'd be a guy in the 8th inning dealing, he'd strike out the last guy. The fans would let him know about it. The Oriole fans would applaud a great performance on the mound. They would applaud a great defensive play. And I just thought that was kind of weird, you know. And then all of a sudden I went, no, it ain't weird. It's really cool. You know, going back to, I don't know, it was the 50s or whatever when Memorial Stadium was built. You know, people loved baseball back there. I mean, maybe it was all they had. I don't know. But they knew the game. And that was the thing that I remembered the most about 1992 and 93 was just how knowledgeable the Oriole fans were about the game of baseball.
Yeah. Out of everything you did in your career, how does being the opening day starter at Camden Yards for the first opening day at Camden Yards, how does that stack up?
I'd have to say it's number one by far as an opening day is concerned. You got to understand, there's always going to be another opening day, right? You're going to have one every year. Somebody's go out there and do it. I had pitched several opening days before that. But as far as opening days are concerned, that was by far the most incredible game that really I was ever a part of. But I'll tell you what's number one overall was somehow they selected me in 1988 to pitch the very first game the night the lights went on at Wrigley Field. And the funny part about that, or disappointing for me, is that it was going to be the first night game ever at Wrigley. And then we got a 3-1 lead in the bottom of the fourth inning. I need 3 outs to get the win, and it started pouring. And I think it rained for like 24 hours. We never got to finish that game. So even though I thought I was going to be the starter in the first night game ever at Wrigley, that's not true. I mean, I started the game when they turned on the lights the first time, but the first night game officially was the next day. So even though that game doesn't count, that's a memory. That was probably the biggest event I was ever a part of, just because of how long Wrigley had been around and how they were the last team to have lights and all of that. But you know, at Camden Yards, it was just different. It was just walking into there, I could look, you know, at what Wrigley Field looked like. I could look down the left field line and see Fenway. You saw old Yankee Stadium there. You saw a lot of that history. And then you saw the fans facing you. And then you saw the walls in the outfield built perfect for the great play by the outfielders that were athletic. We'd come out after the ball game and, you know, everybody was talking about how great the food was. It wasn't your old popcorn hot dog thing. I mean, it was literally healthy. It was different than anything baseball had ever seen before. And now you see it all over because of what happened in 1992. Wow. You know, we've talked about the stadium and how it's built and the fan experience, the seats being pointed towards the mound and not the outfield. We've talked about the food and everything. That really didn't have much to do with me as a player. I'll never forget walking into that clubhouse. I'd been in the clubhouse at Dodger Stadium. It wasn't great. I'd been in the clubhouse with the Cleveland Indians. It was horrible. I'd been in the clubhouse at Wrigley, and being honest with you, back in the late 80s, it wasn't good. I mean, a lot of the other ballparks were better. As I walked into the clubhouse opening day, and I think really more so the second day after I pitched opening day. I didn't do a whole lot before I took the mound on the opener. But the next day when I walked in, I looked at my locker and it's like, oh my goodness, look at this. I mean, all the space I got, the great chair that I got. And I wanted to get a little workout in. And all of a sudden, there's a weight room. And I'm going like, oh my goodness, it was like I was at, you know, a fitness center. Everything you could possibly want to get better was there. I tell you, kind of a true story and a funny story. Halfway through that year, Cal Ripken had a bad day. He went 0 for 4, and I think he made an error. And I had pitched that day. I pitched a complete game. As I come in to get ice on my shoulder and everything, Cal's on the treadmill. And I got the ice on my arm and everything. I went out, I did all the interviews. I came back in the trainer's room to grab something or whatever, and Cal was still on the treadmill. I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "What I did today is unacceptable." I said, "You've been there for an hour." And he goes, "Yeah, I might be here for another hour." And I just thought, wow. I mean, there were a lot of the ballparks that I played in that wasn't going to be available for him to do all the stuff he did there. But, you know, then you go into the trainer's room and there's the whirlpool, there's the hot and cold. There were so many things to help you as a player to get better if you wanted to do so. And I think along with how beautiful the stadium is, I think just a lot of the ways it was constructed for the Baltimore Oriole player was a big drawing card. I mean, you know, later on they got good, they got a lot of talent, a lot of free agents wanted to come play there. I think that home clubhouse was a big part of it.
Yeah, and kind of going off the clubhouse, the last question I have is about your teammates. What is sharing an experience like playing for the first time at a new stadium? What is that like? How does that kind of help with the locker room? How does that like bond you guys as teammates? Just what does that mean to the group and the team chemistry?
Well, as you can imagine, in 1992, after Cal Ripken won the MVP in '91, he was the go-to guy for the everyday player. He was the guy they could relate to. They could look to how he prepared for a game. I knew right away from the things that Johnny Oates said about me in spring training, I knew that Ben McDonald and Mike Mussina were going to pay attention. We actually helped Chris Hoyles call the game for those guys to get them going to begin with. So, you know, I knew I was there more so to help our team get better than what I was going to be able to do. And just being that go-to guy, it meant a lot to me. To this day, I'm great friends with Mike Mussina. I'm great friends with Ben McDonald. We get together, we talk a lot. I mean, we share a lot together. In 1993, Johnny Oates called me about Jamie Moyer. He said, "What do you think about him?" And I thought Jamie had retired. I said, "Jamie, I mean, great guy. What, is he going to be a minor league pitching coach?" He goes, "No, he wants to play." Well, he went on to win 256 games. I mean, he came there and got it together. He asked me about Fernando Valenzuela, and I'm like, yeah. I go, I don't know what he could still do, but I know he will be an asset to have around. Fernando went on to pitch for a long time after that. And I'm telling you, what I talked about with the clubhouse and all the things that were there to get better, those were things that those guys leaned on and eventually extended their careers. They're just everything about Oriole Park at Camden Yards was perfect.